Today's guests are Kayla Kajicek and Bob Hoekstra. We joined their conversation in the faculty lounge.
And got my Master of Fine Arts in Costume Technology.
And why Ohio University? Why? That's a pretty small school.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of bigger schools teach either just design or just technology. Like they'll teach you how to either draw a costume or draw a set or draw props, but they won't teach you the construction process of how the costume goes together or how the set or props are built. Or they'll teach you the other way. They'll just teach you how they're built, but not teach you how to design. So in Ohio, I learned about what the designer goes through in arriving at a rendering to design a costume, and also how to work from that rendering to build a costume.
Did you learn to render?
Mm-hmm. But I don't enjoy that as much as I like building costumes.
Did you take art classes when you were?
Mm-hmm. A lot of figure drawing. Mm-hmm.
And now explain exactly what it is you do.
Well, the costume designer, the first step in the design process is the designer meets with the director and discusses the themes in the play and the concepts for each character. And then they create renderings, which are just a drawing of the character in costume. Mm-hmm. And then they take those renderings to the costume shop. In different places, the costume shop is staffed differently. Obviously, if theater has more money, they're gonna have a bigger staff. In university theater, it's a smaller staff. But whoever is there, whether it's a costume shop supervisor, a shop manager, cutter drapers, master drapers, tailors.
You just ran by a whole bunch of names of jobs that I've never heard of. Drapers and what are these people?
You know what's funny? What I'm trying to explain, I teach a 15-week-long class, which I'm going to give you a brief, in a nutshell, what it all is here. I could
give me the syllabus version.
Well, there's just a team of people that work together to create a costume, and each person has different roles. And if you have the money to have a fully fleshed out team, then you have it. But if you don't, then it's just a few people. So that's what I'll explain, how it works at UCF. It's just me and the shop manager. I'm the shop supervisor, and I handle the day-to-day operations of the shop. And the shop manager handles budgeting and overseeing the big picture. So the design process, the designer comes to me with her renderings for the show. Mm-hmm. And we talk about what kind of materials, what fabrics she wants them built out of, how she wants them to look. Basically, she explains the renderings, where seams are, where zippers are.
That's the designer's choice rather than your choice?
Well, it's a combination. It's always a collaboration, because sometimes designers will design things that aren't possible. And then it's my responsibility to say, why don't we, for instance, for the next show that opens next week, Most Happy Fella, the designer wanted to put a zipper on the side front of a dress because she thought it could be hidden under trim, but it wouldn't have been hidden. It would have shown, and it would have looked strange to the audience. So I encouraged her to put the zipper on the side, that sort of thing. A lot of compromises like that are made.
Sure.
Yeah, so I meet with the designer and discuss how she wants them built, and then based on that, I either draft or drape patterns for everything.
Uh-huh. You draft or drape.
Mm-hmm. Those are the two basic methods for arriving at a pattern. Drafting is taking the actor's measurements and using geometry and math, drawing out the shape of the patterns on paper, and then cutting them out of fabric. And draping is taking a piece of fabric and a dress form and draping what the shape of the pattern will be, and then putting that back into a paper pattern. For most things that I do a combination of a little bit of draping and a little bit of drafting, depending on if it's something more flowy, like a bias cut dress, it's easier to drape that than to draft it. But things that are more structured, tailored garments, you always want to draft them before creating them.
Aren't there programs to do this now?
Yeah, and in fact, we just went on a costume symposium to Walt Disney World, and their costume shop is almost entirely computerized. They have programs that draft the patterns and can size them up to any different size of an actor, and then they can print out the patterns. No one even has to draw them, and then they can enter that into a cutting machine where they lay out all the fabric on a table and a laser cuts the shape out. Those programs are so expensive. They're not practical. They're not affordable. You have to be Disney to afford them. And the robots will never entirely, it's my theory that robots will never entirely replace humans. The human eye and the human hands will always see details that you can't get a machine to see. You always have to fit a garment on an actor's body and make adjustments.
I would assume Disney still does that.
For.
I mean, after they're cut, they're still...
There's still plenty of employees in their costume shop that still fit everything.
Sure. So how long have you been at UCF?
I just started this semester, but I've just been there a few weeks. How about you? How long have you been at UCF?
14 years I've been hanging out.
You've been here a while.
Yeah, I've been here a while. Right. I want to know more about this whole field. You specifically talk about building this, not about the design side. You chose not to go into the design side?
Yeah, design isn't necessarily everyone's goal. Like, it's not everyone's goal if they're studying performance to be an actor in movies. Some people want to act in smaller theaters. You know, you don't always... People that don't know about an industry have an idea of what they think everyone's goal, the top of the field is, but it's not my goal to design. I'm not as interested in that. I'm more interested in the building process, creative problem solving, and actually physically sewing and fitting on actors and building things.
Is this for you a temporary stop at a university, be an academic theater, or does it look like a career?
So far, I really enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. Every other job I've had before this has been temporary, because in theater, pretty much every job is temporary. You are contracted to work for the season, and then after that season, they'll ask you back, or you can ask to come back, but it's your choice to go to another theater for the next season. But academic theater, of course, you can come back year after year and teach. So far, I think I like it, but we'll see. I've already signed on for next summer to go back to my summer job at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, where I've been the past 3 summers. Because in summer, you know, there aren't as many students at UCF. They don't need all of the theater staff there.
They don't need a lot of us in the summer.
Oh, yeah. What do you do in the summers?
Well, this past year was really interesting. Normally, I was at the university teaching, but this past summer, I actually went out and was a construction supervisor on a big construction site.
Oh, cool.
Just to do something different, and it was an interesting summer. But we could maybe talk about that later. I still want to know more about this whole thing. Do you get to choose the fabrics, or does the designer do that? And are they specialty fabrics, very different than what the fashion industry uses? Or you just go to Joann Fabrics and pick some stuff up?
It's a combination of a lot of that. In Orlando, there aren't any, well, there's only one specialty fabric store, Sewing Studio, off 436. Otherwise, if you can't find it at Sewing Studio, you have to get it at Joann's. And those are our only sources in Central Florida.
What makes it a specialty thing? Is there something unique about the fabrics that you like to use in the theater?
In my class, I spend about 3 weeks teaching them about fabrics.
Okay, well, give me the syllabus version again.
Of that. Different fabrics are higher quality than others, and in theater, a lot of times you can cheat quality for durability. Usually what you can find at Joann's is sufficient for what we need to do. At other theaters, if you have the time to go to New York and shop at the fabrics stores there's plenty of stores with a wider variety of fabric. At Joann's, you're not going to get the same variety. And in Miami also, when I worked down there's a lot of specialty fabric stores. But the problem with specialty fabric is it's always going to be more expensive than a polyester blend that you can get at Joann's. And sometimes more expensive on theater will read just the same as something that is more durable and less expensive.
Okay.
And the designer mainly chooses the fabric, but they can sell it with whoever is constructing them a lot. On Most Happy Fella, the show that opens next week that's set in the 1920s, the designer wanted a lot of bias cut dresses, of things that were sheer and things that were satin, and those aren't appropriate for every design. They won't always hold up. They won't always give the shape that the designer wants. And so it's my job to step in and say maybe we should choose something thicker for that. Maybe we should choose something of a different weight, of a different fabric for that. But the designer does all of the color choices. I mean, they'll consult with me if they have a question about what color they like better, or. But so it's a collaboration. Everything in theater is collaboration.
Where have you worked before?
Directly before here, I was at the Florida Grand Opera in Miami as their costume coordinator. I left that position actually because they they are pretty new in their program and they're just growing. And they started out as just a rental house where they only rent the costumes and they don't do any building of them. And now they just opened a new performing arts center down there, and they're moving to a place where they will be able to build more costumes, but they're not there yet. So what I did when I was there was mostly organize rentals, which is not really what I enjoy to do. I don't like being behind a computer. I would rather be behind a sewing machine or at a cutting table. Before that, I worked at the Washington National Opera, and I worked at the Santa Fe Opera and the Colorado Shakespeare Festival that I'm going back to next summer.
And those were internship type positions or very short-term positions? How long have you been
for the season. While I was going to school at UCF, I would go for the summers to Santa Fe for their summer season because Santa Fe Opera is only open in the summers. And the Washington National Opera, I only went for a winter season.
And those, I don't go to much opera. Those seem like really big shows. I mean, in terms of costuming, and it's big pageantry.
It's a bigger scale. It's a bigger scale and it's a bigger budget. An opera, they have the money to spend on it, so they spend it everywhere they can. And it's really fun to work in. It's really, especially in Santa Fe, things are so detailed and so extravagant and huge casts. The numbers of people in operas. In Florida Grand Opera, we had a production of Aida that had, I believe, 70 people in the cast with 3 or 4 changes each, so about 200 costumes.
And so on these costume changes, what do you do? I've worked a little bit in theater. How do you build these quick change costumes? Somebody runs off the stage and 15 seconds later they're back on in a whole new costume. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm. A lot of times we have to quick rig things with snaps or Velcro. Velcro is not optimal though because it's really noisy backstage. And it doesn't always line up correctly. Snaps is always going to snap to each other. Velcro, you can have one side of your shirt up here and one down there.
I do that anyway. So, okay. Do you make tearaway costumes?
Sometimes, depending on how long the change is. If you have 2 minutes for a change, if you can have 2 dressers backstage with them, maybe you don't even have to rig it. A lot of designers will say that they don't want a quick rig because they can always kind of see from stage that it is quick rigged. I think with snaps on a button front shirt, you don't always see it. The show that we just closed last week, Largo Desolado, had one quick change where he changed from pajamas into a shirt and tie and a trench coat. And then he just came on in that and then went off stage. He never took the coat off. So what we did was we cut the shirt into a dickie and we cut the tie and had it Velcro back. So he just Velcroed the dickie on and threw the trench coat on over that. So sometimes Velcro is appropriate, especially if the change is only 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah. So where do you see your career going? I mean, we talked a little bit about academia, but what would you like to do? Are there some big shows that you would dream of doing, or does Disney look good to you? The other areas?
For me, right now, I'm really happy at UCF. Disney does look good to a lot of people, and I encourage a lot of my students to go to Disney too. We actually have a partnership program with Disney, and one of our graduate students in costume design is there right now, and she loves it. She's really learning a lot, and they're cutting edge of technology, and they have the money to be cutting edge, and they can do things really fantastic and over the top. So Disney is great for some people. For me, right now, I'm really enjoying UCF. I really enjoy teaching and explaining things to students so they understand them. There's no show that I particularly want to do. I'm happy doing whatever.
Talk to me about a little bit about the history of theater, history of design that you've gone through. What are those courses like? And
well, at UCF, I took general survey of costume history, where you study from the beginning, from Babylonia and Egypt and Rome and Greece, and all the way to the 20th century. And it's interesting to see how quickly costumes change. Like, there's a unit on Babylonia, there's a unit on Rome, there's a unit on 15th century, 16th century, 17th century. And then when you get to the 20th century, styles are changing so quickly. There's a unit on 1900 to 1910, 1911 to 1920. And styles are changing so rapidly, and especially in the 20th century, clothes are going to read to see from a different period, more so than when people wore and that's interesting.
But is some of it just sensitivity? I recognize costumes, clothes from the 50s, 60s. I can but because I lived through it, so I recognize it. Is that part of the reason in the Shakespeare's, did they see that kind of change, and we just kind of lump them into a 100-year class now?
Maybe to a certain extent, but I think technology changes quicker and styles change quicker, and I think that you can kind of lump them into a 100-year class. That maybe they changed subtly through the years, but for a major time period, styles remained the same.
Okay.
And for a lot of cultural reasons, again, costume history is a year-long course to learn all of the complexities of why people change and why people wear the things that they wear.
And why do we wear what we wear now? That's the impossible question. But what is driving fashion in the United States right now? Do you have an opinion on that?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You had the impossible question. I didn't mean to do that to you. I really didn't. I see some of the stuff that they put down runways and the really strange things that are going on in the whole fashion industry, and I just wonder about it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Have you ever been to any of our shows at UCF, the theater productions?
I have. I have done quite a bit of theater and filmmaking in my career, and so I've been to a number of shows. I haven't gone to any this year. I haven't seen anything this year yet. So.
Well, there's a lot of good ones coming up. Most Happy Fella opens next week, and that's going to be really cute. It's a musical set in the 1920s. It's a big cast, a lot of big show-stopping numbers.
Is that a British show? Or is it
I don't know. I know the costumes are really beautiful, and there's a lot of great musical talent in it, and there's a lot of great choreography.
UCF just added a whole major musical theater, didn't they?
Right, and minor in dance. So the programs have really grown a lot since I went to UCF. So they do the quality of the musicals has really increased. Definitely. What kind of theater have you done?
I've been mainly on the technical side.
Me too.
I tried going out on the stage and was just not comfortable there. Mm-hmm. So most of it has been in lighting and sound design. Mm-hmm. So and most recently I've done quite a bit of lighting design.
Mm-hmm. When you've done lighting design, do you do a light level set with costumes?
Oh, I insist that the costumes come out, we get them on the stage, because the color shifts that happen under our lights are just, we can really mess up what the costume designer wanted. So we can get these beautiful lighting looks, and then the costumes come out and they're just awful. So yeah, I do a lot of that to make sure that the costumes are going to work under the lighting design. I'm sure you've had that experience where beautiful blacks turn these really ugly browns and
or a green and a blue, and you thought they were both black.
Yeah, yeah, because those dyes start coming out. Yep.
So you've done some theater, but what do you mostly do?
Well, I'm in the industrial engineering department, and my area of research officially over there is alternative fuels and high performance racing engines. So it has nothing to do with that other part of my career. But in my career, I started out, my bachelor's degree was English and theater. And then I ran a production company, a film production company, for almost 15 years. And then went on and got a master's in design.
Where did you go to school?
Cincinnati. Well, my undergraduate was Calvin, a little school in Michigan. But then I went to the University of Cincinnati and got a master's in design there. And then made that left-hand turn in my career, did all the other prerequisite stuff, and ended up in engineering, got a PhD in engineering. So,
okay.
And I still live in both worlds. Tomorrow I'm going to go over to the engine lab, and we're building a 700 horsepower engine, and then probably tomorrow evening I'll be sitting in and doing some drawing and doing some interior design work, which I still do.
So interior design, is that the same as interior decorating?
Not even close.
No?
Not even close. And then, in fact, it's really interesting that the state of Florida is one of the toughest states, but they have really come down on the whole side of what an interior designer, if you call yourself an interior designer in Florida, you have to be licensed by the state, and in order to get a license as an interior designer in the state, you have to have passed a national certification exam. You have to have a degree, a minimum degree, a 2-year degree, but they're moving that up now to a 4-year degree in interior design. And the entire field is actually taking over the interior design of buildings. And the reason for this is to protect the safety and health of people in facilities, whether it be in a home, which isn't quite as regulated, but certainly in all public facilities. And so the field, the way it's developing now, is architects are doing the exterior planning of the building, and interior designers are taking over and doing the interior planning, of the flow of it, ensuring that the ADA requirements, the requirements for the disabilities are all met. Hallways are wide enough, they're not too long, there aren't blind hallways, and all of that kind of thing that can be really critical in an emergency situation.
You don't think about all that.
Yeah, and that really is the designer's job, to figure out how to make it flow so that people enjoy being in the space, but then also make sure that everything works in terms of the safety of the facility.
Well, it's kind of similar to what I do. Like, you want the costume to look a certain way, but also you have to make sure that the actor is comfortable on stage.
Yeah, I would think.
Combination. So do you watch a lot of HGTV? I do.
Yeah. I watch some, and I end up screaming at my TV sometimes because some of the things
the choices are terrible.
It is so awful.
And they put leaves on the walls glued to them.
Oh, part of the problem is that on HGTV, an awful lot of the people that are designers, purport to be designers, have had no interior design training whatsoever.
Haven't gone through those regulations.
They're really actors, and everybody's a designer. Everybody can design. There's a store downtown in Orlando here. The name of the store was "Everybody's a Designer." And,
oh, great!
And there's almost that kind of an attitude. Well, I've got good taste. I can design, and it really isn't about that. It really is about understanding the technology, the flow, all of the requirements. I mean, it really is an entire field of study in its own right.
And so you also build engines?
Yeah. So that's the problem, I would say. I've worked in NASCAR, so I have worked for Rusty Wallace and did design work on his engines, and I still run a master's degree program at the university where the students that come through learn how to design and build high-performance engines. They get their master's degree in it and then go on to some of the top racing teams all over the world.
And you do research in alternative fuels? That's something I'm definitely interested in, because gas is going to run out.
It's not going to run out for a while. I do work in alternative fuels and alternative engine designs. And one of my frustrations is that there is so much about alternative fuels and so much misinformation out there right now. Hydrogen is simply not a viable option.
Really?
And won't be for a very long time. Recently, I was invited to speak at a hydrogen conference, and the title of my speech was "The Great Hydrogen Lie."
Huh.
Because the media, along with politicians, want people to believe in the United States that it's just around the corner. Hydrogen's use of it in vehicles is just around the corner. And it simply isn't. We don't know how to make it efficiently. I mean, the only place basically you can get hydrogen is by either splitting a hydrocarbon apart, taking methane or an oil-based product and splitting it apart, or splitting water. And both of them require a lot of energy. And so then the immediate question is, where do we get all the energy to make hydrogen? To make the energy in the first place. And solar isn't going to work. It might as a small piece But you add up all these small pieces and we're still not anywhere close to the energy demands that we have in the United States for vehicles. So
what about ethanol? Is that kind of the same thing? You don't have it developed yet?
Well, no, ethanol has a number of problems. One of them is that all of the alcohol-based products produce some very unfortunate emissions, and we don't control those emissions, and since they are not labeled and controlled, nobody talks about those emissions. But they actually produce aldehydes, and when I say that, most people go, well, so? Think back to high school biology, formaldehyde.
Okay.
That really nasty stuff. It's a level 1 carcinogen. And so